Hello, hello, hello. Had to connect to the Wi-Fi because I forgot. I'm not at home if you guys couldn't tell. So I had to connect to the Wi-Fi, so we're good. We're going to have good connection. And so thank you guys very much for hopping in. So I'm going to be keynote speaking for Clubhouse here in a little bit. I don't know if you guys are on Clubhouse. I have a Clubhouse account, but I'm not active on it. I'm more of a video-based person, but a group of people asked me to speak at this telesummit. And so I'm going to be doing a keynote speaking here in a little bit. So it's a lot different from what you guys are used to in terms of my teaching. So this isn't even really, this is really actually for Clubhouse. And so, you're welcome to follow me on Clubhouse if you want to. I'm not very active. I shouldn't say not active, not very active, not active at all on Clubhouse. But wanted you guys to be able to hear the keynote. I think that some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, I think are going to be relevant to, as a matter of fact, I know they're going to be relevant to the things that you guys are going through, regardless if you're dealing with a narcissist or if you are trying to recover, trying to heal, if you're on a healing journey. So thank you guys very much. So you may notice that there's not going to be as much interaction between me and you as what there normally is throughout, in my lives when I go live weekly, because this is specific for Clubhouse. So I apologize in advance, but just wanted to make sure that you guys knew what was going on and why this is different, why I'm on Saturday instead of through the week, instead of Monday through Friday like I normally am. So so if you guys are looking, I don't really understand how Clubhouse works. But if you want to listen on Clubhouse instead, or if you want to join a very good, healthy group on Clubhouse, I definitely recommend this narcissistic abuse advocate group. Let me see if it's advocate group on Clubhouse. And if you want to link up with them, you can find them on my Instagram account as well. So we've been talking for the last couple of days and weeks, and this, group of people that I think that they do a really good job. And you guys know that I'm a big advocate for surrounding yourself with good, healthy people when you're trying to recover from narcissistic abuse, when you're trying to recover, when you're trying to heal, when you're trying to get the validation that you need. It is very important for you to connect with other people. So thank you guys very much. And don't forget, this is going towards Clubhouse, so I may not interact as much as I normally do. So I'm waiting to be called up. We have about 10 minutes before I get called up. But again, give me a high five if you guys are on Clubhouse. So I know Clubhouse is very, very popular, but maybe I'm the one that's missing the boat with Clubhouse. But for me, it gives me triggers because it makes me feel like I'm working a corporate job again. It feels like I'm on a conference call. So it's not my thing. But a lot of people seem to really enjoy it. So if you enjoy more of the audio version, audio things, then I would definitely recommend Clubhouse. And then I think Spotify has something as well called Green Room, where it's more audio than it is video. So one of the things that I do like about Clubhouse and these type of things is that if you are working, you can stay connected and you can listen to people talking. That's one thing that I enjoy about Clubhouse, is that instead of actually watching you and being distracted, you can be connected with people, listening to people about healing journeys live, right? Without needing to feel like you're watching on the phone. So those are some things that I think I like about Clubhouse and about Green Room on Spotify. But I have to be honest with you, I'm not very active on it. I'm more of a video person, I think, because of my ADHD. But so we're going to be waiting for them to call me up. So this is a little bit different. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoy my keynote. And before we go, let's see. It looks like I wear socks to sleep. No, I don't wear socks to sleep. But thank you for chiming in. Let's see. Let me see if we have any questions today. How many people are actually on Clubhouse? Give me a high five if you're on Clubhouse. Maybe like I said, maybe I'm the one that's missing the boat. Today's topic. So for those of you who are just hopping in, So today I am keynoting for a group on Clubhouse. So I'm waiting to be called up. So the the title of my keynote is From Toxic to Triumph, right? From Toxic to Triumph. And so people are asking, people are shocked that I'm here on a Saturday instead of during the week like I normally am, right? I'm waiting to be called up on Clubhouse. I'm going to be keynoting a conference for them, for a telesummit. And so I'm waiting to be called up. And once I do, I'll be going. So I'm not going to be as interactive with you guys today as I normally am. But sorry, I'm trying to listen to make sure they didn't call me up. But so today's title, right, is the title of the keynote is going to be From Toxic to Triumph, right? And so I'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a hint because a lot of it is going to be geared towards things that you guys hear me talking about often, about how once we leave a toxic narcissistic relationship, we can't stay stuck in that mindset, right? It's important for us to then at that point take responsibility for our healing, to be able to move on, to be able to move forward. Right? It's important for us to realize that the abuse in the relationship was not our fault, but the healing is 100% your responsibility. And at some point in time, like you hear me talk about so often, we have to stop pointing the fingers at the narcissist, at our narcissistic ex, and begin, right, this new journey, right? And understanding that we have to now take ownership of our life, ownership for our healing. We actually have to, a lot of teams, give me a high five if you've ever said, or if you've ever thought to yourself, I need to heal first before I start dating. I need to heal before I start doing this. I need to heal before I move on, before I do this. And then you find out, unfortunately, that you end up staying stuck in whatever situation it is that you're in. There's a reason for that. We're going to be talking about that today. The reason why is because you actually have to choose to live first. So people who are stuck in dating, you actually have to choose that I want to date first. It's not healing first. You choose life first. Then it starts the healing process. You don't even know what you need to heal until you choose life. Right. And so it seems like it's a backwards way of thinking, but you almost have to reverse engineer your healing. That if you want to get married again, if you missed out on part of your childhood, we have to understand that we need to choose to live. Right. If you want to recreate certain aspects of your childhood, we have to choose that we're going to do it first. If you haven't traveled first, if you haven't traveled as much as what you would like at this point in your life, you have to choose to travel. Then the healing starts. And so we're going to talk about that a lot today. And so I may go silent here because I'll get called up here pretty soon.
Talking a little bit about in my own situation, I was the financial heavy. I was the one who made all the money.
So I'm going to turn them up and I'm going to kind of give them the stage and then I will get started here once they call me up. So thank you guys very much for joining. And feel free to comment and talk amongst each other. I won't be able to chime in because I'll be focused here. However, I'll likely have some Q&A afterwards, depending on how long it goes. But the focus and even the Q&A when I am done talking is going to be focused on them.
Financially, and I'm still also pouring into myself because that's where I am in my journey. So I just don't want people to think that financial control is always about.
It's good. They're talking about financial
money in a situation.
Financial abuse right now.
I did have the money. I had a really, really great job, and my life has completely changed. And I'm not going to say for the worse because my belief system and my understanding of material possessions was never all that strong. So losing a lot of things over the course of the last couple of years has actually been a blessing. But it has been a long road. And so I will just tell a little bit of my story during the hour I'm with Laura, which I'm so excited to be, and just some tips about what I might do differently and how I might think differently about what I was doing. Uh-oh, I lost everybody.
No, we're here. I was just waiting for someone to pop in. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. My apologies. I was still trying to update the times on the website to get those to reflect correctly.
I figured
so
everyone
I think we're all set on
making
this.
a cup of coffee, so I was fine.
The name of the room
Thank
on
you
Clubhouse
so much,
is called
everyone. We are
Narcissistic Abuse.
so
I'm not
excited
sure.
for today. And again, if you're having any trouble accessing the rooms, or if you have questions, or if you're just looking for resources and guidance, definitely please feel free to reach out to any of us. We are more than
If you're
happy
looking
to
for the
help.
Clubhouse room,
We've
go
got
to
our
my
keynote speaker,
Instagram
Matthew
page,
Pfeiffer, up
because
next.
I'm literally about to get called
Excited.
up right
He's
now.
gonna be
So go to my
talking
Instagram
about,
page and they will
from toxic to
it'll show you where
triumph.
to
This is
go.
gonna be an
You can kind of go down the
incredible
loophole
talk.
that way.
Really, really looking forward to it. You should be able to see a little box at the top of your screen, so you can click on that to get into the next room. If not, you can go to narcissisticabuse.club/events,
And honestly, I don't know how Clubhouse
and
works,
that will take
so
you to the
it
full
would take
list
me
for
forever to
today.
try to
So
figure it
thank you so much, everyone. We're going to go ahead and close this room and jump into our next with our keynote speaker. Thanks, everyone. See you in the next room.
So I am really, really confused about how this works, because they closed one room and then are opening another room or something on those lines. And so, like I said, I am new to Clubhouse, or I've been on Clubhouse, but I don't really understand how it works. So those of you who are looking for the room, make sure you go to my Instagram. I have it all linked in my Instagram, so you can find where you need to be. Kind of going down the loophole. It should be in my stories. It's definitely in my post. And I have everyone who's actually running the room, I have them tagged and all that stuff. So
Thank you. And just modding the three of me, Sally, you and Nikki. Yep. Thanks, Lynn. Of course. Thank you so much. And I see that Matthew has joined us. Thank you so much, Matthew. We're so excited to have you here.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, this is truly incredible. I mean, I know myself and others here on the stage and in the audience, like, we've seen your content. I've been following you for quite some time. You've done wonders helping me in my own journey, and I know I've heard others express that as well. So we're just incredibly grateful to have you here today. I just wanted to do a quick introduction for you, for the audience, but then I'm going to kind of let you take it from there, if that sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some people I think that are going to be joining your room, because you guys are streaming live on TikTok right now as well. So a lot of people are asking about about your rooms and the groups and Clubhouse. So you might have some new followers here soon.
Well, that is super exciting to hear. That's so great. We absolutely love this community, and that's really what it's all about, is just bringing people together, a place that they can talk with each other and get that support that they need. So we really appreciate that. So with that said, everyone, please welcome our special guest. We have Matthew Pfeiffer here. He's a speaker, he's a trainer, he does podcasts, he creates TikTok content, YouTube videos. I mean, he is all over, and he creates amazing content to help us through this journey. He's an expert in toxic relationships, narcissism, trauma, and emotional abuse. He's also the founder of Matt Pfeiffer Coaching. He creates training content that has been used in countries all across the world. He's also written a book that's available on Amazon. I'll let him talk about that. But with that said, Matt, I'd love if you just want to take it away, and we're really looking forward to it. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Vanessa and Nikki, for reaching out. This is an absolute honor. And I can't tell you how thankful I am that you guys asked me and to share. It's always fun to be able to speak to people and to be a part of people's healing journey. It's always an honor because, it's you're really getting into the in-depths of people's lives, right? Into some of the nitty gritty of and people who've experienced this. And I was in your last room where I heard someone saying that that when they were going through this, that they that they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have all the resources, they didn't have TikTok, they didn't have Clubhouse or any sort of group, so they had to do this cold turkey by themselves. And so to be able to open things up and to be able to be a part of people's lives to a point where we're all able to grow and strengthen one another is always great. So thank you guys for allowing for me to be a part of that journey with you guys. So today, the title of my keynote is From Toxic to Triumph. And for those of you who followed me for a while, you guys know that sounds very familiar because it's the name of my podcast. And so you guys have allowed me to be a part of your journey. So you guys now are going to be a part of mine. So From Toxic to Triumph, the reason why I came up with the name in my podcast, and it's really been a part of who I am, a part of my brand, and a large part of the reason why I do all the things that you mentioned, the TikToks, the Instagrams, the YouTube, is because people need to know that when you leave a toxic or narcissistic relationship, and I say toxic or narcissistic because as a lot of people begin to find out on this journey that sometimes it's not all about narcissism, and we can't just, and even if we don't label someone, we have to now look at the behavior of how people are treating us. And that has to also become a part of your new journey, that your journey has to be more about not, is this person a narcissist or not? It's now has to become, am I being treated with the respect that I deserve? However, the respect that you deserve, do you believe that you deserve respect? Because quite often when we go down this journey, we find out that that's where the problem actually started, right? The problem, when we start going down this journey, we start to realize that the problem started long before we actually met the narcissist. If we're talking about a romantic partner, right? It started out long before we even met the person. Right? It started out with our own insecurities. It started out with our own self-worth. It started out with our own self-esteem, right? And so when we start going down this journey, and it begins this scary, lonely road initially, right? That we have to understand that guess what? Narcissism, toxic people, it's been around forever, and I promise you it will be around forever. One of the things that happened, kind of a side note, to kind of explain narcissism briefly and why and how we need to be able to take responsibility for our lives, even after narcissism, or after we've experienced narcissistic abuse. One time, so I'm actually in Buffalo, New York, but one time when I owned a home in New York, and people who followed me for a while, you guys know this story. I found a bat in my house, and I took care of it, and I took care of it by myself, and went to a friend of mine who was an exterminator and bragged to him, like laughing at him, like, I don't need your services. Look, I took care of the bat myself. You're just overcharging people, just kind of giving my friend a hard time. Not realizing, right, what was about to happen was that he said, if you found one, then guess what? You probably have a much larger problem. And so he came over, he did his thing, he did an inspection, and come to find out, he was 100% right. There was a much larger problem. The problem was in my attic. I basically had a bat cave up there. I can't tell you how many bats were in my attic, and the reason why there was a bunch of bats was because there was a small, extremely small hole in my attic, extremely small. Right, something that I think to the naked eye, if you didn't know what you were looking for, you probably wouldn't recognize it. You wouldn't notice the difference. You would just continue on with your day. But if you know anything about bats, right, they can squeeze into just about anything as long as they can, they're able to flatten themselves out, and just like mice and other rodents. And so it created this problem, right? So when we bring that same scenario over to our life, right, we understand and we realize that narcissists are not going anywhere, right? We're going to have to work with them. We have, some of them are going to end up being our children's teachers. Some of them are going to be our coworkers. We may go on, a lot of times people on dates, they ask the question, how do I not attract narcissists? You're going to attract narcissists. I promise you, when you hit the dating scene, guess what? You're going to go on a few dates with a few narcissists, right? And so for a lot of people who are in recovery, they hear these things and they say that it's scary. And so what happens when we don't have the type of communities that we have these days, when we don't have TikTok, when we don't have places like Clubhouse for people to connect with, we think that a lot of people end up shutting down, just stop, and they quit, right? And they stop dating altogether. They stop living life altogether. And what ends up happening through that process is that they actually stop and stunt their own healing. So we have to understand that, number one, that narcissism is not going anywhere. But number two, if we really want to heal, we have to understand that it's not about healing, then living life. It's not about healing, then going to date. It's about choosing life first. It's actually quite the reverse. We actually have to choose to live first. Once we choose to live, then guess what? That's what starts the healing process. So going back to this whole bat situation, if I wanted to get rid of the bats, guess what? I had to take responsibility for my home, and I had to do a much better job of closing up those holes. I had too many gaps. Guess what? The boundaries of my home were not protected. I, as the homeowner, had to take responsibility for that. Bats are not going anywhere. Rodents are not going anywhere. It doesn't matter how many exterminator friends I have. It doesn't matter how many bats I get rid of out of my house. Right? I had to take ownership as the homeowner to do a much better job of protecting my home, of having inspections done and things like that. And when I did notice that there was an issue, I needed to make sure that I did a much better job of taking care of it moving forward now that I have this new knowledge. I didn't have the knowledge before. So it wasn't necessarily my fault that these bats came in. However, it is 100% my responsibility to make sure that those things don't ever happen again. And this is what it is. This is what we need to learn once we go through this process, that no, the abuse, the control, the manipulation, the things that you went through, there was no excuse for that. And those things are not your fault. However, it is your responsibility to heal. Just leaving, right? And everyone has been through that situation where everyone says, just leave, just leave, just leave. Just leaving is not good enough, because we forget that we left for a reason. We left to live a better life. We left because of the lack of fulfillment. There's something else that you wanted. You wanted a better life. You wanted a healthy relationship. You wanted a better job. You wanted that promotion. You wanted to write the book. You wanted to live the life that you always had dreamed and planned. You knew that there was better out there. However, quite often people get stuck in a situation where they don't go live that life. And they spend years, sometimes decades, sometimes the rest of their life, right? Even though they're not with the narcissist anymore, even though they're not with anyone anymore who are abusive, they are still, guess what? Being abused, even though they're still in no contact. Why? Because they're still stuck in a certain mindset that's keeping them locked in home, not friendly with people, right? Still living a life of trauma, still living traumatized by the narcissist, not understanding at the fact that they can take ownership and they can live life. However, they have to choose life first before they start to heal. So, for example, there's a lot of people who begin a whole dating series after narcissistic abuse. They start dating and they get scared off because, once again, we know that narcissism exists. We know that we're going to run into another narcissist, right? Just like, guess what? Even after I had a bat in my house, I've seen multiple bats, sometimes in the wild, sometimes in captivity. They're not going anywhere. I've seen multiple rodents. They're not going anywhere, right? Have they been in my house? No, right? Why? Because I've taken ownership, I've taken responsibility. But what we have to understand is that, guess what? It's not, once we've left, once we start the healing process, we can't allow for the fact that this knowledge that narcissism is out there and that abusive, toxic people are out there. We can't allow for that to now cause us to shelter ourselves. That's not how we protect ourselves. For me to protect my home, the answer was not for me to completely shut everything down, shut everything out. That's not the answer, right? The answer is to fix the damn hole. That's the answer, right? As uncomfortable as it is to get into my attic and to plug that up and things like that, and to go into those dark areas and to actually deal with an area that in a room that I actually never, besides that situation, had never been in, right? And this is what it's like when we go down this healing process to heal ourselves and to make sure that we don't go down this road again. We actually have to go into the areas that are uncomfortable. We have to go into the areas that are insecure. That we have to go into the areas that we're afraid of, right? Our own. Guess what these areas are? Our own insecurities. We have to become self-aware. So going back to what we were talking about in terms of dating. For a lot of people, they say that they want to date, they want to get into a healthy relationship, and they want to find a good, healthy partner. However, if we want to, and we're using this just as one example, because we can use the same example at work, with friends, with family. If we want to be in a good, healthy relationship, then guess what? We need to be healthy in a relationship. I'm going to say that again. If we want to be in a healthy relationship, we need to be healthy in a relationship. What does that mean? That means that we have to take ownership, right, for who we are. We need to love ourselves first. We need to take care of ourselves first, setting boundaries first, right? Understanding that when we become a healthy person, what happens through this process is that now we are able, now we know that we're deserving of love, and we won't accept anything less than the love that we're giving ourselves. We have to choose life first, right? We have to choose life first. But if we're going to choose life, we also have to understand that life isn't always going to be all about happiness all the time. And this is where a lot of people get mixed up, especially when we're coming out of a toxic narcissistic relationship. We think that we're supposed to be happy all the time, especially with social media these days, right? And that's not what the healing process is like. We have to understand that if we're going to be, that the goal is not to be happy. The goal is actually for self-acceptance. What does it mean to be self-acceptant? It means to acknowledge, right, that there's some aspects about me that are absolutely phenomenal, absolutely great. But sometimes I might get pissed off. How am I going to handle life when I'm angry? How am I going to handle life when I'm upset? We have to understand that healing, right, to be healed, that does not mean, right, that everything is going to be perfect all the time. And that's the misconception that people have when it comes to healing, that also keeps them stuck, because they think that they're trying to strive for this unachievable goal that now becomes overwhelming, that now keeps them stuck, and it sends them down this overwhelming rabbit hole. That's not the goal anyway. You're never going to be perfect, right? The goal is for self-acceptance, that we're going to accept all of the great aspects of ourselves, the creativity, the things that we know that we provide, but we also need to accept some things that we may not like about ourselves, some of our insecurities, and get our insecurities not to where they're perfect, but to a point where they are no longer overwhelming. Right. So, which brings me to my final point. If we're going to go down this journey, if we're going to go down this road, if we're going to go down this road of self-love, of self-acceptance, of this road of healing, right, we have to understand a handful of things. We have to understand that this new road of boundaries, of self-love, it's a journey. It's not just a journey, but we have to think of it more of like a muscle, an underdeveloped muscle, right? And so what does that mean? There's not a destination that we're trying to get to. If you think about people who work out a lot and people who like to train and like to be physically, aesthetically pleasing, or like to run or do anything that in the realm of athletics, right? We have to understand that for them to get to their peak physical shape, one of the things that you have to understand is that they have to get there first. But it's not like they get there and then they just stop. It's not like they just plateau and then they're done. A lot of times people ask me, well, what boundaries should I set? Boundaries are one of those things that you have to continuously develop all throughout life. It's like a underdeveloped muscle. And so when we bring that same mindset over to the realm of healing and self-love, self-acceptance, right? We have to understand that we need to be striving for our best, but understanding that we have to continuously work out this underdeveloped muscle. And even once we get to a place where we are self-acceptant, self-aware of who we are, it doesn't mean that we stop. It means that we still need to condition that muscle that has been underdeveloped, that muscle of self-love, that muscle of self-acceptance, the muscle of thinking that everything always has to be perfect all the time, right? Of codependency, of being a people pleaser. We have to develop to overcome and develop these muscles, these areas of lack, which brings me to my final point. Ultimately, we have to get to a place of self-forgiveness. Quite often, people talk so much about self-love, self-empowering, but I think people underestimate the power of self-forgiveness. Now, what does self-forgiveness mean and what does it look like? We're going to talk about self-forgiveness. If we're going to forgive ourselves, the same rule that we talk about when we forgive others is the same rule that applies when we're talking about forgiving ourselves. It requires changed behavior. If we're going to forgive other people and we say that there has to be changed behavior for us to forgive other people, we also have to now begin to acknowledge that if we're going to forgive ourselves for allowing for someone to mistreat us, if we're going to forgive ourselves for allowing for some of the things that have happened, if we're going to forgive ourselves for the reactive abuse that we engaged in, when we know that we did something, when we know that we've done something, we know that we may not have, for some people, they may have cheated on the narcissist, right? And they don't feel good about that. If we're going to forgive ourselves about that, guess what? It also requires changed behavior. The same way that we would require that from other people. And this is what's hard for a lot of people when we're talking about healing. These are those dark areas that we were taught that I was mentioning earlier that we have to now begin to look in, right? We have to now look at these behaviors from ourselves and require from ourselves change behavior, developing this muscle of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-forgiveness to begin to move life, to begin to move forward, and to begin to not only accept our life, but choose life, right? To choose to date, to choose to live, to choose to be a better parent, to choose whether or not I want to get married again, or choose whether I want a large family or a small family, or to choose to travel again. We have to make that decision first. Then that healing process begins, but that healing process also requires self-forgiveness of the things that we may have engaged in or have allowed in the past. But if we're going to forgive ourselves, that also means changed behavior, which also requires self-forgiveness and self-awareness. So with that being said, thank you guys very much for having me, and I will open it up to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Matthew. We really appreciate you being here with us. And before I just talk about what you spoke about, if anybody in the room has any questions, please feel free to direct message us here on Clubhouse, one of the mods, and we will ask that question to Matt. Matt, I don't know if you'll have any questions on your end. You can jump in with those. But everything you said is just real. It's what people are going through. One thing that I speak to my clients about all the time, and it's something I always focus on, is relationship with self. Right. It is so, so important. People don't understand that is the most important relationship you will ever have in your whole entire lifetime.
Right.
And, your self-worth and who you are and what you bring to the tables and, your boundaries, the healthy boundaries you set are things that are important to you, where it comes from your morals, your values, your core. Mm-hmm. So, that is so important. And that's how we can go out into the world. Once we have that healthy relationship with ourselves, we can go out into the world and
be protected. We'll be able to protect our peace and know, like, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm good, and walk away.
Right.
You know, and also too, during the healing process, we have to be mindful, to be patient with ourselves and to be kind to ourselves.
Patient and I would say realistic.
Right.
Right. And
like,
to be realistic means that we have to realize that the goal is not perfection. And what happens when people go down that pathway is that they start to realize that strive for perfection was actually a part of the abuse. That was actually the mindset that was the conditioning that the narcissist or the handful of narcissists that you dealt with created, making you feel like you needed to be perfect. And therefore, because you keep on falling short, you just stop trying altogether. Right. That's what part of self-acceptance. Self-acceptance means that I need to accept also that, there's parts of me that I'm insecure about. There's parts of myself that are, I don't want to say not that great, right? But we have, for example, my followers know I'm very open about the fact that I struggle with ADHD. I'm unorganized, right? I'm extremely unorganized, and which is part of the reason why I've called you so many times, checking on the time of when I had to come on. But what that looks like is that I have to accept that that's a part of who I am. But to accept that, guess what? Now I can actually address it. I can go into that dark area that we were talking about earlier.
Right. No, you're right. And we all know that this process is not an overnight process. It's not that,
No.
People ask me constantly, well, how long is it going to take me?
Yeah.
Your time is your time.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do, you go ahead 5 steps, you do something and it may take you back 3, but you're still ahead.
Right.
Every day, whether it's, it doesn't matter. Time does not matter in the healing process. Everything that you do, everything that, I have a lot of people saying about the no contact. Oh, I broke it. Okay, well, that's part of the healing process.
Yeah.
It's part of, what happened? Did anything change? No. Okay. So now you learned, and this is part of the journey, and it's part of your healing process, and everyone heals at a different rate, a different time. Yours is going to be different from someone else's, and we all go, we're all here.
Right.
But, I always say there's a playbook for, what we've all been through. Somewhere out there, everybody, when you sit down and you talk to people, they all went through, it's different, versions, but they all went through the same things.
Right.
And, I wish I had a magic wand that I can hand to people and say, here, you're going to be healed tomorrow. I wish it could be like that. But, part of the healing journey is actually connecting with ourselves and
Absolutely.
to truly understand the amazing parts of who we are and the things that, hey, you know what? That's who I am. I'm going to accept it. Or I'm going to change certain things about myself because I don't like that about me. And it's all about us. It's about us going within and truly, bringing ourselves to a place of growth. And every day is a day. We have that opportunity every day to grow.
Right.
And we're never going to go back to who we were, but we are going to become a better version of ourselves.
Right.
So everything you did say was so important. I thank you so much. And again, if anybody has questions, please direct message us. Matt, I don't know if you got any questions on your live. Nikki, Sally, Lynn.
Well, I wanted to piggyback off of something you said, Matt, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective on basically us coming back home to ourselves and doing the work. Because I shared with you earlier when we had our own Zoom session, a lot of times people can overly focus on, signs for a narcissist. Mm-hmm. What are the red flags? What am I looking for? And when you first get into that world, it's totally understandable. But a lot of times people camp there and they don't move forward towards recovery. So thank you so much for what you've shared today. But the part when you talked about forgiveness, and particularly self-forgiveness, I'm really connected to that because in the work that I do and what I've noticed sometimes even on Clubhouse and just listening to different people, a lot of people who have come out of the abuse, they're so hurt and they're worrying about, I have to forgive him. I have to forgive her. I know I need to. And I hear societal pressure. I hear religious pressure. I hear familial pressure on the survivor to, you got to forgive the person if you want to move forward and heal. And I often try to help survivors understand and help to validate, listen, forgiveness, if you're going to forgive, start with you first. Mm-hmm. Don't put the emphasis on the abuser first, because that takes away from the personal work and recovery you need to do. Mm-hmm. And I guess my question to you is, with the work that you do and where you've spoken and things of that nature, do you find a lot of survivors focus more on forgiving the narcissist versus forgiving themselves? Do you find a lot of pressure from society, religion, things of that nature, where, so overly focused on forgiving the narcissist?
Yeah, I find a lot of it because people think that, number one, people think that forgiveness is a requirement. It is not a requirement. It is not a part of self-forgiveness. I would say that I could argue that is a requirement. When we're talking about forgiving someone else, it is not a requirement. Some people, it does not. For me, forgiving other people was a part of my process, but it does not need to be a part of everybody's process. Because for some people, forgiveness was weaponized and it's actually traumatizing at this point. And so to ask someone who has been abused, and let's say that they, I know you deal with victims who were struggling in cults and things like that. And if that was a part of the process, to always consistently forgive, and for decades of their life, they were always asked to forgive, and that always led to more and more abuse. Right, you can understand and you can see where forgiveness is actually traumatizing for that person and very difficult for them to let go of what that person has done to them. So forgiveness, number one, it's a process, even if you do go down that process, but it's also not a requirement. I would say, and I would argue, though, that forgiving yourself, right, is a requirement, but it's not a requirement for when we're talking about forgiving other people. But to your point, one of the things that you said is forgiving yourself first. Quite often when you forgive yourself first and we begin putting those pieces back together, a lot of times that'll actually tell you exactly what you need to do about certain situations. Because like I was saying, if we're going to forgive ourselves, we can't just say, hey, myself, everything is okay. You did your best. If we're going to forgive ourselves, there has to be changed behavior, just the same way that we would require that from someone else. So if we're saying that we're going to change our behavior, sometimes that actually empowers us to actually make a better, more clear decision of what it is that we need and what it is that we should be doing in a certain bad situation.
Yeah, and that's where the healing comes. That's when we turn the corner from being just educated about narcissism or domestic violence or spiritual abuse. We now become healers from within our own temple, within our own self. We get our autonomy back. We get connected back to our bodies. We start to work on regulating our nervous system. When the focus moves from the narcissist to ourselves. And I agree with you that going down that long hallway and looking inside of ourselves can be very scary. Sometimes we want to push it away because sometimes we believe the lie that, well, that means I'm saying it's my fault and not the narcissist. No, abuse is abuse.
Right.
But when we start taking ownership, because there are sometimes programmings that we don't even know that we received in family and relationships and different religions and different forms of society that we don't even know are there, that kind of cause us to be drawn to these individuals. So I can't but help to totally highlight and just say, yes, everything you're saying, I totally agree with. And I hope for the listeners in the audience and on TikTok, that they understand this is the most important component to not only healing and surviving, but thriving and finding life after walking through these abuses. Right. So
I want to piggyback off something you just mentioned in terms of, the abuse is not my fault. And that's one of the things I preach to people, because a lot of times when I tell people that we have to take responsibility for our healing, especially when I very first came out, people, it really sent people twisting, but there's a big difference between fault and responsibility, and the abuse was 100%, on the narcissist and that sort of thing. But we also have to talk about responsibility, because one of the things about responsibility is that is one of the core essence of boundaries, where your boundaries come from, is who's responsible for what. right? So if you're not responsible for your healing, who is, right? And if you're saying that it's someone else's responsibility to heal you, you are now you're actually, if you think about it, you're actually potentially leaving yourself vulnerable to enter into another codependent relationship. This is the reason why we have to begin to look at self-forgiveness, right? Understanding that we have to now change our behavior and responsibility, that I have to take responsibility for this healing, because if I don't, right, the likelihood, and to kind of bring everything back full circle, narcissism is not going anywhere. Toxic people are not going anywhere. They've been here from the beginning of time. We're going to have to work with them. We're going to have to deal with them. They're going to be in our drive-thrus. They're going to be everywhere, right? So, but if we take responsibility for our healing, guess what? It's not an issue, right? We now need to understand that, like I tell people who follow me, there's two people in the relationship that need work, not just one. We have one person that's called the codependent narcissistic trap, where the narcissist is constantly taking, but the codependent is constantly giving. We have to understand that. Is it okay to be nice? Is it okay to be there and things like that? Of course, but we need to find that balance. And the only person that can find that balance is you. And the only person that can figure out where that balance lies is for you to take responsibility for your healing.
Matthew, I just wanted to say as well, thank you so much. You touched on so many really important topics today when it comes to healing. And there was a couple of things you said that really connected for me. One is, many of us, I don't want to speak for everyone, but many of us, when we come out of these relationships, or even, when we're kind of starting to figure things out, we tend to really focus on the narcissist. Yep. What is narcissism? What does it mean? What's happening to me? And that's all very important, useful information, right? That's very helpful for our healing and understanding where we need to put boundaries, because it helps us understand what are some of the red flags. But like you said, it's so important that we get to that point where we take that energy from them and start focusing within ourselves and on ourselves. And that's where the healing really starts to come in. And I just wanted to mention too, you kind of called me out in a good way. But I was one of those that I got stuck in a phase of my healing. And I did the very thing where after I got out of the experience, I understood, what I was dealing with, what happened, but I got stuck. And it was because I isolated myself, because you know how these experiences, they can completely change your perspective of people, right? It like opens your eyes to the, really evil nature of some people. And so I got stuck, and I was convinced, how can I ever trust anyone again? I can't trust people, I just need to stick to myself, right? And that really had me stagnated for a while. Where I started to transition that is when I realized, okay, it's not logical that absolutely no one is trustworthy, right? And when I actually really reflected on it, what I discovered is that I didn't trust myself. And that was something I had to face. It was, I didn't trust myself to be able to know what the red flags are, hold those boundaries in place. And I absolutely loved your bat analogy. I think that describes it so well. So can you, if you wouldn't mind, do you kind of have any tips or recommendations for practicing boundaries or learning boundaries? There's many different capacities that we can do that, but sometimes people get a little nervous because it's well, what if I am dealing with a toxic person again? Is there a healthy way that you can practice those boundaries with others?
Well, number one, we have to understand that boundaries come from within. Everyone's boundaries are going to be very different. My boundaries are going to be different from yours. They come from, so boundaries come from a place of emotional intelligence. So one of the things I mentioned when we were talking is that we have to be very in tune with who we are. We have to get to a place of self-acceptance. We talked about that the goal is not to be happy all the time, right? The goal is to actually process all of our emotions and to go into those dark areas. Right, to understand that when I'm pissed off, I actually have to process and I actually have to understand why am I pissed off, and that's a part of the self-acceptance process. right? Accepting where you're at, accepting when you're upset, accepting when you have anxiety. Here's the reason why. Because when you're with a narcissist, if you're with someone who's abusive and toxic, right, you do think that you're supposed to be happy all the time. They convince you of that. And what happens is that you're actually literally sacrificing yourself. You are ignoring the fact that you're upset. You're upset for a reason. That was actually a boundary that you ignored, right? So when I'm pissed off, someone has violated a boundary. So I actually need to address whatever boundary that was, right? So a lot of times, so let's use jealousy as an example. Jealousy has, some of these emotions that we have that have like a bad connotation to them, right? People think that jealousy is a negative thing. It's just it's another one of your emotions. We have all of our emotions for a reason. Just like, like I was saying earlier, our emotions aren't going anywhere. You're not going to be happy all the time, and that actually would be a problem, right? It would literally be like you not having any feeling in your hand, and then you put your hand on a hot stove and you can't tell that you're burning. Right? That's what our emotions. So let's say that you didn't have jealousy and you had someone, you met someone, and let's not even enter narcissism into the mix. And this person was overly flirtatious and texting someone and this and that, right? And you're not jealous at all. Your boundaries are about to be violated, right? You have jealousy for a reason, because that's your point for you to stand up and for you to say, listen, I'm not okay with this, right? I don't appreciate you texting your coworker, right, at 10 o'clock at night, and so our boundaries come from the way that we feel. And so the faster that we can the faster that we can speak up for how we actually feel, and the faster that we can learn how to process our feelings, the faster that we're going to be able to address certain boundaries. And I also encourage people to be as proactive with their boundaries as they possibly can. So one ways that we can practice this is that, let's say that you're going to go hang out with your friends, right? Let's say that you're going to go meet up with them for happy hour. Be very proactive about your boundaries. Yeah, I can meet up with you guys. I do need to be home by 9, right? I do need to be home by 10, or I got to leave by 10, but yeah, we can meet up, right? Set the boundary before you actually go before you accept that invitation, right? And the other thing is that we have to study boundaries. We have to read books. One of the best books that I've read on boundaries is called Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship. As you know, I've been far removed from my situation at this point, but I still read books on boundaries. And the reason why is because just like I was saying earlier, boundaries, self-love, all these things, they're like a muscle, right? And we have to continuously, condition that muscle. And the third thing that I would say about boundaries is that we have to understand that boundaries are they're a live thing, right? It's not like these are my boundaries and then that's it, right? Your boundaries should change based on circumstances. I recently went through, a situation not too long ago. Guess what? My boundaries changed based on the new information that I have, right? And I always compare that to a restaurant. You can have a favorite restaurant, and you go to that same restaurant, order the same thing for 10 years in a row. But I can promise you that even after 10 years, even after them being very consistent with as great as the meal is, if you find a rat tail in your meal, I can promise you your boundaries are about to change, right? Your boundaries are about to change because you now have new information. And so it is okay for your boundaries to change based on the new information that you have. So for me, I'm not going back to that restaurant anymore. I don't care if it was my favorite restaurant. And so the same thing happens when you're setting boundaries with people. You may have been trusting of someone for a long period of time, and then you find new information that they have been cheating, or that they've been, or that they were married when they weren't supposed, when they told you that they weren't. The information has changed. So guess what? The boundary also can change too. A lot of times people think that boundaries are these, very stringent things, right? They're fluid based on the information that you've gathered on the person. And if the information changes, then guess what? So does the boundary.
Well, that was a great response. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. Does anybody else, I don't know if Matt, if you've gotten any DMs with questions, or does anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I actually do, Matthew, but you can go ahead first if you have some.
So this person asked, how do I forgive myself for ignoring the red flags? So to forgive yourself for ignoring red flags, so that's a part of the forgiveness process, right? We have to look back, and this is very uncomfortable sometimes, and you can actually feel these feelings, this emotion kind of in your emotional center, right where your sternum is. Right? When we begin to look back and we begin to acknowledge that there were some red flags that I saw, and I saw because everyone actually. So let me clarify what she's asking, because this is someone who's been following me for a while. Let me clarify what she's talking about. So one of the things I challenge people to do is to look back, because a lot of times people will say, I had no idea. I had no clue that this person was like this. I was just completely caught off guard. And every time I hear that, I challenge them. And I don't know if we're allowed to cuss here, but I tell them bullshit, right? And, out of respectfully, that's bullshit, right? Because one of the things that we have to talk about, if we're going to take ownership and responsibility, we have to look back, right? And quite often, I would say pretty much every single time I've asked this question, there was always, because if we're saying that we had no clue, right, that means that there's a much bigger problem, that our instincts and our intuition actually is not working, right? So when we look back and we say to ourselves, and in that love bomb phase, there's always something that happens, right? It might be something small. It might be a text message. It might be them going off on a waiter or a waitress, right? But there's always something that happens during that love bomb phase that lets you know that you need to walk away from this, right? And we continue even though we see that red flag, right? For some people, it may have been that the person was moving too fast and you said something, right? And they're like, well, I thought you were serious. I thought you wanted to get married. I thought you wanted to do this. And you continue on with the relationship, right? And so, but everyone sees it. And usually it's pretty early on, within the first few weeks or months. And so when people look back at this red flag, and when people are out and they look back and they say to themselves, yeah, I knew it, right? I wasn't, I shouldn't be surprised that this person was a cheater because they were doing this. They were texting people right from the beginning, or they were, they had a girlfriend right from the beginning, or I should have known that they were violent by the way that they had that road rage when we were on our second date. Right. When we start looking back at that, and to get back to the original question, how do I forgive myself for ignoring these red flags? The way that you forgive yourself is the fact that you even acknowledge that they were there. Right. That actually is where we actually begin to build our own self-trust back again. You knew it. That's actually a good thing. Right. You saw it right from the beginning. What that actually tells you is that, listen, So going back to what I said before, self-forgiveness is about making sure that these type of behaviors, that we don't engage, that we take responsibility, and that we change our behavior. So if you're going to forgive yourself, then you need to now trust yourself. You knew it, right? You may have ignored it back then. We can let that go, right? We didn't have the information that we have now. Right. And so now we have new information, just like we talked about just a second ago. Now we have new information. And based on this new information, I'm going to make sure that I change my behavior moving forward. Right. And so moving forward, you can tell yourself that, listen, I did not know that these were red flags back then. Right. Or, telling yourself, you told me to leave. If we're presented with this type of dynamic again, I'm going to listen to myself. Moving forward, I'm going to listen to myself. Moving forward, I'm not going to give multiple different opportunities after I feel that gut instinct that this isn't healthy for me. So we can actually look back at that moment and actually acknowledge that I was right. Right? I didn't make the right decision, but I was right that this was a red flag. And so you can now actually build self-trust based on that new information that you have.
That was great. Great question, too. And I think you touched on something really important. And Sally, we can go to your question, too. But you touched on something so important about the fact that when we go back and reflect, we often start to realize that those red flags were there. in the beginning, and this is something that really threw me for a loop, was recognizing that in fact the love bombing was part of the abuse, right? And it's hard to grasp at first when you're going through this, because you're like, well, it felt so great though. I was so happy. I felt like I was on cloud 9. But it is, in fact, part of the abuse.
Yep.
And that alone, like you said, rushing you, when it's like they want to talk to you all the time and they want to do everything with you constantly and dominate your time, that is, in fact, a red flag, despite the fact that it feels great, right, to get all that attention. So it's really good point you brought up.
Let me, because one of the things that people are shocked when I tell them this, but people who, and for your listeners, I don't do one-on-ones anymore. I do have a lot of other things that I'll offer here in a little bit. But one of the things that I tell people that I've worked with before, once we heal, we're not looking for narcissism. We'll find it, right? When we're dating, we'll see it. If we're loving ourselves, if we're setting good, healthy boundaries, the narcissist they'll show themselves. That's not the issue. We're not even looking for it. I don't even really talk to people about, let me rephrase. I do talk to people about red flags, but we're not looking for them. They'll pop up on their own. Because the thing about it is that just like the person who asked that question, right, we actually knew it in the beginning, right? The problem is not that we don't see the red flags. We do see them. We do feel them. It's more about feeling, right? That I feel like this person is lying. I feel like this person is cheating. We have to base this off of our instinct, and we have it, right? And that's the reason why we always rebuild based on that intuitive feeling that we had in the beginning with the narcissist. So we're not looking for that. They'll show themselves, right? That's not the issue. They're good. They're crafty. And to be perfectly honest with you, once you engage in self-love and self-respect and boundaries and things like that, they're not that good, right? It literally, after a matter of, it's a very short period of time when you set boundaries, it's amazing how quickly they start to show their true colors. Amazing, right? Because when we talk about love bombing, I wish that I were around when people were creating these terms. All love bombing is grooming, right? And so what do we tell our kids when we talk about child predators? We tell them, don't accept candy from strangers. What's the candy, right? It's love bombing. Don't talk to people who are offering you puppies and things like that. Why? It's over the top. It's creepy. And we know that this person is overdoing it because they want something in the end, right? And so when we talk about self-love, loving ourselves and setting boundaries, when we start to have our own personal limits and we have a full life that we actually love and we're full of love, now that behavior, the love bomb, it doesn't feel good. It actually feels very creepy, right? Because we already have love, right? We already appreciate ourselves. And so this overwhelming, this person laying this on thick, we actually see it for exactly for what it is. It doesn't feel as good. It actually starts to feel overwhelming, right? And it starts to feel creepy, just the same way that stranger would trying to groom and talk to a child. We see it for exactly what it is. But what happens when we lack self-love, right? And we lack and we have this self-love deficiency, and we're struggling with codependency and people pleasing and everything that comes along with narcissism. It's very similar to I talked earlier about how this is very similar to weight loss journey and diet journey and things like that. If you have not, I don't care what diet you're on, I don't care how serious you are about your diet. I don't care if this is like the New Year's resolution thing. If you have not eaten all day, everything looks good. On your way home from work, everything looks good. McDonald's looks good, Burger King looks good, Wendy's looks good, and you will break off of what you know is right for you when you're starving of food, of nutrition, things like that. If you continuously eat throughout the day and you're taking care of yourself, you're going to be more disciplined about you're going to wait till you get home. You're going to eat something healthy. You're going to do what it is that's right for you. It's the same thing with self-love. If we are loving ourselves, we're taking care of ourselves. If we are setting good, healthy boundaries, we're not going to fall for the love bombing, right? What I teach people is that we're looking for good, healthy people. But just like we talked about earlier, if we want to be in a healthy relationship, we have to be healthy in a relationship. We have to be healthy ourselves. And because one thing about narcissists, they're not looking for good, healthy people. They're not looking for someone who loves themselves. They definitely don't want someone who's setting boundaries. They're looking for another victim. And so if you are setting boundaries, if you are someone who loves yourself, you are actually going to scare the shit out of them. They want no part of it, right? But a part of self-love is that we also have to understand that when we are loving ourselves, guess what? And they walk away, we have to be okay with being quote unquote rejected, right? Because that rejection now turns into a positive thing. That if someone can't love me when I'm already loving myself, then it wasn't going to work anyway. Right. And we have to be okay with that.
So many great points there. And I know, Sally, you had a question too, right?
Yeah, from an audience member. I think it was in regards to boundaries, when we were talking about boundaries. What about someone who's in a narcissistic, a divorce with a narcissistic person, and the kids are actually showing signs and being toxic, and they're teenagers right now? I don't know if you have any advice that you could give for someone in that position.
I always encourage, if a parent is concerned, I always tell them that they most definitely circle in a child therapist. I would not, at that age, start thinking that that their child is a narcissist immediately or anything like that. Because one of the things about children is that they're still developing. And so quite often when someone is developing, and sometimes this is true of adults as well, a lot of times they just don't know how to, especially if they've been dealing with it, especially if they've lived in a home that lacked proper communication skills, lacked proper boundaries, lacked proper structure for a good long period of time. Now they've developed a lot of unhealthy coping skills, unhealthy communication, those sorts of things. And so they may actually be dealing with some things in terms of their emotions and things like that. Before we start thinking that this child is going to be a narcissist and just throwing our hands up, we have to go down these avenues, that understanding that it could be that they just don't know how to communicate after witnessing this for a period of time, right? And so quite often, maybe they're not listening to you. So I'd encourage third-party people. But I also would highly, highly encourage for you, right? A lot of times people will just, like we talked about earlier, just throw their hands up and not take ownership, not take responsibility, not saying that it's your fault, right? But we have to now, right, look into this and the way that we look into this is by setting good, healthy boundaries ourselves. Because what happens a lot of times with parents is that they will try to overcompensate and just give the child everything that they want, anything that they want, not setting good, healthy boundaries, not realizing that they're actually enabling the behavior, right? And so I would also encourage you, the person who's struggling with this as a parent, right, to go on your healing journey as well, because you're going to inspire change with your child, right? It'll get rough in the beginning, right? But we have to understand that your child, and ultimately, even in teenagers, they know that they need structure, right? And if you are divorced and both homes one home is chaotic because they have a narcissistic parent, the other home is chaotic because they lack structure because the other parent is codependent, and they know that they can just run them over and bull them over and things like that, right? That also is an issue. And so one of the things that we have to understand is that we can't people please our children, right? Well, we can, but it doesn't work. And so if they're teenagers and we're feeling the pressure of this, I would highly, highly encourage the help of a third party, getting in there through, via a child therapist, reading books, but also go down your own healing journey as well. And also lots and lots of patience, because we have to remember, let's just say that this child is 15 years old. This is 15 years of experience that this child now has that is that we now have to unwind, right? So lots and lots of patience.
Matt, just to piggyback on that, we actually have a room today at 4 p.m. protecting our children from toxicity. That's just something that's near and dear to my heart. I actually raised my daughter from when she was 3. She's 16 now. It can be done. But like you said, there's a lot of patience. There needs to be consistency. There needs to be, we're not there to be their friends, so to speak, and give them everything they want. And it's a tough journey. I've gone through it, and I'm happy to say, like, it can be done, but you really have to.
You have to
put the time in.
Mm-hmm. And I also I have a co-parenting course that I recently did that for people who are struggling with co-parenting with a narcissist. So I have a course, and it also within that course, obviously it talks about co-parenting, but part of co-parenting when we're talking about someone who's narcissistic and toxic is when the child is being manipulated by the other parent. So I talk about that at length in the co-parenting group course. I'm sorry, not group. And so that is so. If anyone is interested in that, that is available in my bio or on my website. And that is, and if you use the code referral 50, you'll get 50% off of the co-parenting course. So referral 50, you'll get 50% off of that. And I also recently launched I actually launched last night a trauma bond course. So if you're interested in the trauma bond course, if you're struggling with the trauma bond, you can. So there was an early bird special for the release, but I'm extending that release or that discount for anyone who's listening or watching. So if you use the discount code Clubhouse 20, you'll get a discount on that as well. So Clubhouse 20 and referral 50. And I also have a membership program as well. Referral 100 for the membership program, and people who join that are able to join my podcast. They are able to listen to my podcast live, and I interview people on my podcast, and so they can ask me and the other person questions and have a Q&A very similar to this afterwards. Sometimes I might even ask their question during the show. And so, I've interviewed judges, lawyers, other clinicians. And so we talked about dreams. Why do we dream about toxic and narcissistic people after the trauma? Because as you guys know, it's important for us to educate ourselves. And for that, you use that.
Go ahead.
And for that, I'm actually running a free 30-day trial on my on the membership. So if you use the code referral 100, you'll get a free 30-day trial on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew, for being here with us today. I absolutely love this talk. I know this information is going to help so many, and definitely please give him a follow. Check out his website, mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Follow him on social media. He creates some really great content, and truly just thank you so much for spending time with us today. I know this has been really helpful for myself and so many others. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, everyone. So with that, we're going to go to our next room. It is pinned at the top. If you don't see...
And there we go. That is it. So I saw some people that were, thank you very much, Kimmy Reed. So if you guys are want some examples of good, healthy relationships, if you guys follow Kimmy Reed, her and her husband have are true, actual relationship goals, and she is someone who's like me, who will give you the truth, right? The truth about because we have to understand that everyone, a lot of other people will point fingers, and it's important for us to recognize, toxicity in other people, but we have to take ownership. Right, we have to take ownership because we are responsible for our own life, right? And so make sure you guys follow Kimmy, because she will make sure that she gives you guys the truth about being in a good, healthy relationship and being responsible. Because just like I said, if you want to be in a healthy relationship, you got to be healthy yourself, right? And we also have to understand that one of the things I love about her page with her and her husband, I will take care of me for you, you take care of you for me. Right, we are even in a healthy relationship, we have to take ownership for our life. That I will make sure that I'm good and healthy, right? And that is my gift to you, right? And you take responsibility for yourself. You be good and healthy for me as well, right? And that's what makes a good, healthy, strong, powerful unit, right? I'll take care of me for you. You take care of you for me, right? Because the other person, they're not, despite what everyone else thinks, right? The other person is not responsible for your happiness. You are responsible for your happiness. The other person can support, but they're not responsible for it, right? So make sure you guys give her a follow. And so I saw some questions about my courses. So the co-parenting course, use the discount code referral100. Referral 50. You'll get 50% off of my co-parenting course. We have one more week of the Q&A session. So we meet every week, every Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Central Time, to do a Q&A based on that course. So make sure you take advantage of the course now before that co-parenting Q&A is over. I released my trauma bond course last night. And like I said, because you guys are listening here, if you use the discount code clubhouse20, you'll get $20 off of that. And if you guys are interested in my membership where people are able to listen to my podcast live, ask me and the other person questions, you get the replays of my lives. You also get a community of people where you can connect with and talk to on a regular basis. I'm running a free 30-day trial on that. And if you use the discount code referral100, that will apply that discount. So thank you guys very much for hopping in, and I appreciate it. And if you guys are struggling with the referral codes and trying to figure them all out, make sure you send my assistant an email. Her information is in my bio, or you can connect with one of my moderators as well. So thank you guys very much. You guys have a great weekend, and I will talk to all of you soon.